Adjunct Professor Moran, Microeconomics 112. Now that we've reviewed some basic concepts concerning demand is a willingness and ability to buy goods and services. The law of demand is a negative relationship. It's summarized by a demand schedule, a numeric table that expresses a relationship between price and quantity. A change in quantity demanded, which only results from a change in the price of the good itself now. A change in demand, which is a shift of the entire curve as a result of a change in number of consumers, income, tastes, expectations, substitutes, complements. Now that we've reviewed these concepts, we can add the concept of consumer surplus. Once we have the demand curve, we can define the concept of consumer surplus. The consumer surplus is the value received from the purchase of a good in excess of the price paid for it. Or stated differently, the difference between the amount a person is willing and able to pay and the actual price paid for each unit. This is a very economic way of saying, hey, I just got a great value. I was willing to pay more for something and they only charged me this much. It's that woohoo feeling. It's important to know the consumer surplus because not everybody feels the same way about a good. Some people are willing to just pay a certain amount, other people are willing to pay more. That's consumer surplus. Consumer surplus is maximized under perfect competition, pure competition, and it's reduced under types of competition called imperfect, which is monopolist competition, oligopoly, and monopoly, for example. An approximation of consumer surplus can be graphically shown by the area below the demand curve and above the price paid. Redraw the first demand curve. I've done that here for you. It's from the front of the page, from the front of the package, this demand schedule. If the price of all quantity sold is established at 30 cents, shade the area above 30 up to the demand curve. That's the consumer surplus. So to shade the consumer surplus, find 30 cents, draw it over to the demand curve, and go up. The highest price on the demand schedule is 40 cents. This area is the consumer surplus bounded by this triangle. I'll show you why this is not included. If the price for all quantities sold is okay, so we did that. Continue to use the demand curve and assume that the price is 30 cents. There are buyers who will benefit because they are willing and able to pay higher prices than the established price, equilibrium price of 30 cents. For example, at 50 million grebes, the demand is 40. The quantity demanded 40 cents at 50. But since the market price is only 30, these people receive a bargain of a dime on the 50 million that they purchase. 30 to 40, a dime value on the first 50 quantity demanded. Buyers of the next 50 million grebes always consider the extra or marginal, since buyers at higher prices will be able to buy at a lower price. Are willing to pay 35 and receive a gain on 50 million. Notice that at 35 cents, the quantity demanded is rising to 100, but these people who value the product at 35 cents are not responsible for all 100 quantity demanded. That's because the 40 cent people are responsible for the first 50. We're now going to calculate the consumer surplus. Approximately what will be the total consumer surplus for the buyers of 150 million grebes at an equilibrium price of 30 cents. So here's 30 cents, and here's the equilibrium quantity. To do this, I've created a worksheet for us to use. Everyone is required to pay the market price of 30 cents. Some people are just willing to pay the 30 cents. But there are other people at 35, 40, and 45 who are also in the market. So I put down their prices, the prices above the equilibrium price. Prices below equilibrium, those people are not willing or able to pay the market price and are not in the market. So the consumer surplus is only found by taking price quantity combinations above the equilibrium. Subtract each one to determine what the surplus is. 2 minus 1, 0. 35 minus 30, a nickel. 40 minus 30, a dime. 45 minus 30 is 15. So these people receive a consumer surplus in terms of price of this much. 15 cents because these people value 45 cents. 10 cents because they value 40 cents, but they're only paying the market price of 30, for example. Now we have to determine the quantity that each price valuer receives, how many each is responsible for paying. Now in total, at 30 cents, 150 is exchanged in the market. But these people don't buy all 150 because people at 35, 40, and 45 are responsible for the 100. So 35-cent people only add 100 to 150. So you take the 150 equilibrium amount and subtract out the prior amounts from the 35, 40, and 45, and that was 100. 150, 30 cent, 100, 35, 40, 45. So they get a surplus on 50 units. 35-cent people are responsible in total for 100, but not exclusively, because 40-cent people are responsible for the first 50. So these people, 35-cent people, are only responsible for the additional quantity demanded from 50 to 100. 100 from 50. 50 quantity demanded surplus. 40-cent people, in total, are responsible for 50. The 45-cent people are not in the market. The price is too high. So all 50 is responsible. 50 to 0 is the 40-cent people. Now, to get an approximate value of this triangle, the consumer surplus, we'll take rectangles that look like this. This is the 40-cent people, length times width times height. 30-cent people, width times height. And as you'll see, 30-cent and 45-cent people have no surplus. 30-cent people receive no surplus in terms of cents, but are responsible for an additional quantity demanded of 50 from the prior group of 35. So 0 times 50 is 0. 35-cent people get a surplus of a nickel on the units they buy and are responsible for a quantity demanded of 50. 100 in total at 35 and 50 resulting from the people at 40-cent value. So there's a 50 quantity surplus there. A nickel times 50 is 250. Their surplus is 250. 40-cent people receive a dime surplus on 50 units. 40 and 50. The next higher user group, 0. 50 minus 0 is 50. So if we take 0 and times 50, the 30-cent people are said to be indifferent. They can take it or leave it at that price. We'll assume they take it but receive no consumer surplus. That is the price they are willing and able to pay. 35-cent people receive a surplus per unit of a nickel and are responsible for a quantity demanded increase of 50. 5 nickel times 50 is 250. 40% people receive a dime surplus per unit on 50 units. 0, the next higher price, valuers, times 50, the quantity demanded at 40 cents. 10 times 50 is $5. The total consumer surplus is $7.50. 250 plus $5. If the consumer pays, if the price consumers pay increase, then the shaded area will decrease. And if the consumer pays a lower equilibrium price, the consumer surplus will increase. This area will be added at lower prices. More people will meet the criteria for being willing and able to be in the market. This person would be just willing and able, and now 30-cent people would have a surplus of a nickel, increasing the consumer surplus. If the equilibrium price drops to 20, what will happen to the consumer surplus? Let's do 25 cents. Okay. So now we're going to, let's say the equilibrium price drops, and we are now, this area will be added to the consumer surplus. So let's do it again. 25 and 25, 30, 35, 40, 45. 25 minus 25 is 0. They're in the market, but they're just willing and able to pay the price. No surplus in terms of cents. They're all paying the equilibrium price. 30-cent people get a value of a nickel. 35-cent people get a consumer surplus of a dime. 40-cent people get a consumer surplus of 15, 20 cents. How much is each valuer of this product going to get a surplus on? Well, in total, the quantity demanded at 25 cents will be 200. But The 25-cent people are not responsible for all quantity demanded of 200. That's because the 45-40, 35-30 people are responsible for this quantity of 150. So the 25-cent people only add from 150 to 200 a surplus on quantity demanded of 50. 30-cent people, the total quantity demanded at 30 cents is 150. But 35, 40, and 45 people are adding this 100. You can just basically bring this amount down for each one. So now 35-cent people, in total, there's a quantity demand of 100, but the 40-cent people add the first 50. 40-cent people are responsible from 0 to 50. Zero times 50, 0 cents consumer value times 50 is 0. A nickel, consumer surplus in cents per unit, times 50 quantity demanded is 250. A dime value, consumer surplus times 50 units, is $5. 15 cents value per unit times 50 quantity demanded units is $7.50. The consumer surplus has risen to $15. As you can see, as the equilibrium price falls, more are added to the consumer surplus, resulting in a larger consumer surplus at a lower equilibrium price.